Hi everybody, welcome to my homestead and welcome to my channel. My name is Jared. In this video, I want to go over part, if not all of this chapter in Millennial Messiah called Mortal Man After the Second Coming. I stumbled across this as I was doing the last video. And in regards to the last video, I knew it was going to upset people or cause um, sadness, confusion, questions, and I didn't intend for that to happen. I was hoping that it would answer questions, but it was not my intent to upset anybody or anything. Uh, Take the initiative, do your own research. Um, we can't ignore what I read, of course, but one thing to remember, a lot of people are distressed about not seeing loved ones again, and I hope that no one came away feeling that because when you think about it, in the pre-existence, I assume, I don't know if this has been said, but I assume that we all knew each other. And so I would also assume that after this life, after the veil is taken off of our minds, we will again remember everybody, and you're still going to be able to visit those that are in lower kingdoms, assuming that you go to the celestial kingdom, right? That's everyone's goal. um, and so I don't think that you're going to be like completely cut off completely from anyone that doesn't make it to the celestial kingdom. So if you have loved ones, a friend, a family member that ends up going to the telestial terrestrial, I do know this, that you can go down and visit those worlds. And so I think that's maybe the thing that you should come away with feeling comforted. But just anyway, I don't want to get too far into that. But and maybe watch the video again if you were kind of left confused, because some people, I'm not sure that they watched everything or heard everything that was said, so maybe just go back and watch it again if you had some questions. Okay, anyway, in this video, we're going to be talking about life during the Millennium, especially when it comes to being translated and what that's all about. Okay, I had to do this video right now because what I read just seemed really interesting. So here we go. Mortal man after the second coming. And let me go ahead. I'll zoom in. Man, in what form is he found? What will be the nature of life in all its forms and varieties during the millennium? Will man and all living things in their infinite variety remain as they are now? Are there changes that must take place in man and in beasts, fowls, fishes, and creeping things to enable them to dwell on the new earth and to breathe the air of the new heavens that will surround it? That's an interesting concept. Um, we've been talking on the channel about climate change and the various explanations as to what's happening on Earth, what's going on with the weather, and all these different things. And my personal belief, I could be wrong, but my personal belief is that Earth is preparing to change. It's preparing to become a terrestrial world. So I wouldn't be surprised if this is right, that there's going to be a new era. And you know, I don't know, I don't know exactly what that means, you know, but I think things will be quite different than they are now, in that you probably will need a translated body to survive in that world. I tend to think, I've said before, I think that the Earth will get warmer and hotter. I think it's supposed to happen, in that our bodies in the conditions that they are right now wouldn't survive in that future world. Anyway, continuing, and with reference to man in particular, what kind of life will he live when Satan is bound and death and disease and sorrow, as we know them, are no more? I know a lot of people are looking forward to that, especially, well, yeah, both death and disease, but especially those of us that are living with disease right now. I mean, that just sounds amazing. Our mortal experiences in our finite logic, devoid of divine guidance and without revelation from on high, would lead us to assume that life has always been as it is now, and that all things will continue everlastingly as they now are. But such is far from the fact, as heaven is from hell. Neither the earth, nor man, nor life of all sorts and kinds has always been as it now is. Mortality is but a slight and passing phase of existence, a shimmering moonbeam that shines from a moment in the darkness of our earthbound life. It is but a day in an endless eternity. Something else came before, and an entirely different way of life will follow after. Before we can even glimpse the nature of things millennial, we must know something about the great and eternal stages through which our planet has passed and will pass. This earth has not always been as it now is, and it will not long remain in its present state. It has changed in the past, and it will take on a new form in the future. Before we can understand the nature of man and his life on the new earth, that is to be, we must know something about the phases of existence through which he may or can pass. He has not always been a benighted, corruptible mortal, subject to disease and death, nor will he always remain so. We need not suppose in our smug self-sufficiency that we know all things about the human race or about the creation and stages of existence of the planet given of God as a home for his children. And I totally agree with that. You know, science right now, and I love science. I'm not against science, um, but sometimes, like, the way that it's portrayed is that science is just like, it knows so much. And it does. All of our science, we do know quite a bit. But I think on the flip side, there's so much more that we don't know. Otherwise, there wouldn't, like, the progression of science would stop because we would know everything. One thing that I think about, for example, is junk DNA. These portions of DNA. They don't know what it's for. It just seems like it's arbitrary, useless. Um, it doesn't seem to have any function, and so they call it junk DNA. Have you heard of that term before? Junk DNA. Let's see. This is from News Medical. In genetics, the term junk DNA refers to regions of DNA that are non-coding. DNA contains instructions or coding that are used to create proteins in the cell. However, the amount of DNA contained inside each cell is vast, and not all of the genetic sequences present within a DNA molecule actually code for a protein. Um, let's read a little bit more. Some of this non-coding DNA is used to produce non-coding RNA components such as transfer RNA, regulatory RNA, and ribosomal RNA. However, other DNA regions are not transcribed into proteins, nor are they used to produce RNA molecules, and their function is unknown. Unknown. So this is like a big, I think that this is a big part of the human creation, our human bodies, our human species that we don't understand, we don't know what it is, but I don't think that it's arbitrary. God created us exactly how he wanted to create us, and everything is there for a reason. And maybe that DNA, maybe it's just like dormant right now. It seems like it's non-coding, but maybe when we're translated, uh, maybe suddenly there is coding going on that comes from that DNA. Maybe that's a big part of being translated for all anybody knows. Right? And it's just like sitting in us, dormant, not doing anything that we know of. So there's all sorts of possibilities, right? There's so much that we don't know about ourselves, about animals and plants and the earth itself. And so when we look at what's happening on earth and we think we understand, or there's different, politics and philosophies of men that are trying to push a certain idea, well, maybe it's just that. Those are just ideas. They're wrong. They're nefarious. In reality, the Earth is doing exactly what it's supposed to be doing. It's preparing to become a terrestrial condition world. Okay, we can no more. Excuse me. We can no more understand ourselves than we can comprehend that God who made us We can no more envision how and in what manner the Lord created the earth and how he changes it from one type and kind of sphere to another than we can step forth and duplicate his omnipotent enterprises. But we do possess some slivers of eternal truth, and we have received certain basic truths about ourselves and the earth that enable us to understand the overall scheme of things. It is this revealed knowledge that enables us to view millennial life in its proper perspective and relationship to all things. This earth was created first spiritually. It was a spirit earth. And that is a wild idea, but it's true. Nothing then lived on its surface, nor was it designed um, that anything should. Then came the physical creation, the paradisiacal creation, the creation of the earth in the Edenic day and before the fall of man. After the fall, the earth became telestial in nature. It fell from a terrestrial to a telestial state. It became a fit abode for mortal life. Such is the state in which it now is. When the millennial day dawns, the earth will be renewed and receive its paradisiacal glory. It will return to its Edenic state. It'll be, as contrasted with its present state, a new heaven and a new earth. Now, a question that I have, I don't think I've ever come across the answer to this. I'm not sure why the earth started in a terrestrial state. I guess it makes sense. You would start at a higher state, you would fall to a telestial state, and then go back up during the millennium, and then finally go into a celestial state. Um, I don't know why it didn't maybe start in a celestial. Well, no, because celestial would be like a final phase. I don't know. Sorry, there goes the siren. If you can hear it, it's noon as I'm recording this. Anyway, if you have like any insights on that, let me know. I guess it makes sense. It makes sense, but I wish I had maybe more concrete explanation as to why. Okay, so in the process of change, the earth will be burned. It'll dissolve. The elements will melt with fervent heat, and all things will become new. Again, as the world heats up, and as like volcanic activity seems to be increasing and all this different stuff, you have to wonder if that process isn't happening right now. There will also be a short post-millennial period of which we know very little, and finally the earth will become a celestial sphere and will shine like the sun in the firmament. And remember, this is something that Brigham Young said. This is that statement where people think it's all weird when he's talking about life on the moon and life on the sun. Let's see. Let me go to topics A through Z. And then I'm just going to read a little bit. I know I've read it so many times, but let me just read it. Let's zoom in so we can actually see it better. Okay, this is under space. Okay. And when you inquire about the inhabitants of that sphere, uh, meaning the moon, you find that the most learned are as ignorant in regard to them as the most ignorant of their fellows. So it is with regard to the inhabitants of the sun. Do you think it is inhabited? I rather think it is. Do you think there is any life there? No question of it. It was not made in vain. It was made to give light to those who dwell upon it and to other planets, and so will this earth when it is celestialized. So that's an interesting idea. And when we're talking about life, again, like I've said many times before, I think he's referring to people that are resurrected, people that are translated, perhaps. Before the resurrection took place, I'm not so sure that there would have been anybody on the sun. But once the resurrection took place, I mean, where do those people go? You know, people that are resurrected to a celestial glory like Abraham, Isaac, Jacob. Um, we can't say for sure. Maybe they went to be with God where he is, but maybe, just maybe, they're still here in this locality, but on the sun. Maybe that's a place that you go while you wait for the Earth to go through its stages. I don't know. Just some different ideas. All right. In its present telestial state, wickedness prevails on its face, and anyone can live here no matter what his lifestyle. When the Earth returns to its terrestrial state, none will be able to live on its surface unless they abide at least a terrestrial law. Hence, every corruptible thing will be consumed when the Earth is cleansed at the beginning of the millennium. That is, all who are worldly, all who are carnal, sensual, and devilish, all who are living a telestial law will be destroyed. Finally, when the earth becomes a celestial sphere, none will remain on its face except those who are living a celestial law. This earth will then become a celestial kingdom. And it sounds like, you know, I'm not so sure how much we know about astronomy. I don't. As good as the scientists are, and the researchers, and the academics, and um, all this stuff, space programs, space agencies, I just don't know how much they actually know. When supposedly, as far as we have gone, ourselves is the moon, and all we've done is send out probes. In fact, the farthest probe that we've sent out, I think it's Voyager. Let's see, what is the furthest man-made object? Yeah, man-made object from Earth, or farthest. Voyager 1. Let's look at the Wikipedia article. It was sent out on September 5th, 1977 as part of the Voyager program to study at a distance of 159.2 astronomical units from Earth as of March 27th, 2023. It is the most distant human-made object from Earth. And I think, I can't remember if it has technically left the solar system. I want to say that I read an article that said something like that. Let's see, Voyager 1 left solar system. Voyager 1 will remain within the confines of our solar system until it emerges from the Oort cloud in another 14,000 to 28,000 years. So, okay. In August 2012, Voyager 1 became the first spacecraft to cross into interstellar space. However, if we define our solar system as the sun and everything that primarily orbits the sun, then Voyager 1 will remain in the solar system for another 14,000 to 28,000 years. So, by that definition, we haven't even left the solar system. And all we can do is really kind of observe things with telescopes and different instruments, radio telescopes, and all sorts of different things that can sense different things. Okay. And all we can do is kind of like guess and use mathematics and use different models. But unless you have a time machine, and I know they're like, well, we can look back because, light travels. All I'm saying, there may be so much more that we don't know, including the sun and the idea of the Earth becoming a star. I know that just sounds wild because, we know that stars are made up primarily, I think, of hydrogen and helium, I think. And it's basically an ongoing fusion reaction. And then it'll go until it runs out of fuel and da 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 da. That's our current understanding, but what if that's not right? I wish I was like an expert and I could be like, well, it seems like that based on this, but we don't actually know. We're not going to know until someone can actually take a spacecraft into the sun. I don't know. And even so, there's probably other layers of this existence that we don't understand. When we look at the moon and it looks like it's devoid of life, like I've said before in previous videos, well, what if we just don't have the eyes to actually see what else is there in other spheres, other dimensions, other whatever you want to call it. Maybe if we had the eyes to see, maybe if we were translated beings, we would look up in the sky, see the moon, it would look completely different than it does to our telestial eyes. And maybe the same thing with the sun. So, in a fallen telestial state, maybe things appear much different, and we can't detect uh, other things that are going on. It's beyond our sensing capabilities. So, okay, man and all forms of life existed as spirit beings and entities before the foundations of this earth were laid. There were spirit men and spirit beasts, spirit fowls and spirit fishes, spirit plants and spirit trees. Every creeping thing, every herb and shrub, every amoeba and tadpole, every elephant and dinosaur, all things existed as spirits, as spirit beings before they were placed naturally upon the earth. Then natural or earthly or paradisiacal bodies were provided for spirit men in all forms of life. Our first parents and the original forms of life of every kind and species, uh, it says species, were placed on earth in a paradisiacal state. In that state, there was no procreation, no death, no mortality as we know it, and no blood flowing in the veins of man or the animal kingdom. Now, that's an interesting statement right there. And I'm not going to look it up now, but President Nelson, back when he was in the Quorum of the 12, he talked about this fact in general conference. He was talking about, I want to say he was actually talking about being translated and being in the Millennium. That in a mortal state, uh, in other words, not being resurrected yet, but being translated, that there would be no blood. And again, that's just a wild concept to what we know right now. Uh, and it actually makes me pretty happy. I'm not a big fan of blood, frankly. I have to go into the VA every year to have my blood drawn to do labs for my yearly physical, and not even to this day, after having been stabbed millions of times over since joining the military, I still do not like blood being taken out of my body. I don't mind needles, really. It's gross. Um, so having a body with no blood, that sounds great to me. Okay, then came the fall, the effects of which passed upon all mankind and upon every form of life. Sorrow and disease and death entered the world. Man and all created things were able to procreate and reproduce their kind. Blood began to flow in the veins of man and beast. Their bodies underwent a change and they became mortal. Mortality is the state in which procreation abounds and death prevails. When mortals die, they live again as spirits, except that they do not return to the presence of God, but abide in a place appointed where they await the day of their resurrection. Um, there is a scripture in Alma that says that you go back to that God that created you and then go to the spirit world. But I've seen time and time again, including right here, where that's been said that that's not true. That's something I've always had a question about. But it was in "Come Follow Me." It said, in fact, when it was going over the Book of Mormon, it said specifically, explain that you don't actually go back to God once you die. You go to the spirit world. So I don't know if that's I don't know if the Book of Mormon is the most correct of all, or I know that there can be mistakes, and maybe that's one of those mistakes, you know, because I think it was Moroni, either Mormon or Moroni, that said if there's any mistakes in it, in the Book of Mormon, then it's the mistakes of man. So I don't know if that's one of those times, but it's just kind of an oddity. But anyway, I was going to say something else. Yeah, this idea of blood being associated with mortality. That's an interesting concept, isn't it? That blood, the thing that's in our the fluid, the primary fluid of our bodies. I mean, there's many different fluids, but the primary one, um, mostly associated with life, it's blood. If you were to remove all other fluids, I assume that you would still probably live. I guess it depends on what the fluid is. But say like your tears, for example, I don't think that you would die if your tear glands were, or whatever they are, if they were drained. But you can't do the same with blood. And it's just interesting. The color of blood, the fact that it's associated with mortality. Christ, when he comes at the second coming, he's going to come dressed in red to represent his atonement and, his crucifixion and everything, us being washed in his blood. It's a very interesting concept to me. Okay, some mortals have been translated. In this state, they are not subject to sorrow or to disease or to death. No longer does blood, the life-giving element of our present mortality, flow in their veins. Procreation ceases. Now, right here, we know of some that have been translated, and I think he's going to go into that later. We know that the entire city of Enoch was translated. We have indications that Melchizedek and his people were translated. We know that the three Nephites were translated, and they're still operating here on Earth. And I have a playlist about the three Nephites and also John the Revelator. He was translated. Um, Elijah was translated. So, yeah, there's been many people that have been translated. And according to what Bruce R. McConkie says here, at that point, no longer does blood flow in their veins, procreation ceases. So if that's the case, it seems the city of Enoch, they haven't had any children since they were translated. The city of Enoch is like a big mystery to me. What I don't understand is when they come back and they join with the New Jerusalem, is it going to be the original people that were there? Like they haven't had any children, any new generations. What have they been doing this whole time? What has time been passing the same for them as it has for us, or from their point of view, did they get translated? An hour passes, they come back down. It's like, okay, we're at the end. That's something I don't know. And when they come back, are some of them gonna marry us? you know, through marriage and everything? Are they gonna? I don't know. But according to this, procreation ceases. Um, if they then had children, their offspring would be denied immortal probation, which all worthy spirits must receive in due course. So this is where I have questions about the Millennium, because my understanding is that we're going to have children in the Millennium, but I think he's going to explain it later. They have power to move and live in both a mortal and an unseen sphere. That's key. An unseen sphere. So the city of Enoch, the three Nephites, John the Revelator, and others. And we read in the Book of Mormon that it's kind of weird, because in the Book of Mormon, let me just pull this up. Scriptures, Book of Mormon, 3rd Nephi. I think it's in chapter 28, I want to say. Yeah, 3 Nephi. Okay. Pray. Yeah, look at this. So this is talking about the three Nephites. And they are as the angels of God, and if they shall pray unto the Father in the name of Jesus, they can show themselves unto whosoever, unto whatsoever man it seemeth them good. So that's an interesting thing. It seems like the default when you're translated is that you're unseen. And in this case, they have to pray and almost like receive special permission, essentially, to show themselves. It's not like it doesn't seem like it's under their control. They have to be authorized. They have to pray in order to do it. So it seems like the default, and I don't know if this applies to the city of Enoch and others, Melchizedek, Elijah. I don't know if Elijah at this point is resurrected. I don't know how that works. But those that are translated, it seems like they are by default in like a hidden state that cannot be seen. So, okay, so Yeah, in an unseen sphere. And as wild as it sounds, they very well could be on the moon. The moon is a symbol for the terrestrial glory. So wouldn't it make sense if you have a people that are translated, they're essentially in a terrestrial condition and they're translated, that they would be on the moon until it's time to come back to Earth um, during the Millennium, when the Earth itself becomes a terrestrial world, in a terrestrial condition, not glory yet, but in a terrestrial condition. It makes sense to me, you know, and you have to wonder about the implications of that, if that's true about us having gone to the moon, or you know, that's how the story goes, because not everybody is on board with that. um, okay, all translated beings undergo another change in their bodies when they gain full immortality. This change is the equivalent of a resurrection. All mortals, after death, are also resurrected. In the resurrected state, they are immortal and eternal in nature, and those among them who are privileged to live in the family unit have spirit children. Yeah, so that's like the level that Heavenly Father is at, right? Millennial man will live in a state akin to translation. His body will be changed so that it is no longer subject to disease or death as we know it, although he will be changed in the twinkling of an eye to full immortality when he is 100 years of age. That's when you go from um, translated to resurrected. Now, this is a really comforting idea right here. No longer subject to disease, because I'm assuming, I can only assume from what he's saying right here, that when you're translated, if you have some kind of disease right now, and I have one of my subscribers, she's dealing with cancer. I know that many others of you have had health issues. I myself have things that I'm dealing with. Once this happens, are these things going to go away? Are we going to be healed? And I think so. I think so. That in itself is reason to like really look forward and be excited about the millennium. Making it into it is finally being rid of disease and death, as we know it, as he says here. That would just be marvelous. I don't know if like you still your body ages the way that it does right now, meaning that once you get elderly, you get wrinkly and you visibly look old. Because I don't know if that's part of just like the part of this telestial condition where we're in a state of dying, and the world is degraded and degenerate, and so I wonder if maybe even that will be done away. I haven't seen anything that says that, so don't get too excited. But okay, he will, however, have children. Okay, well, here you go. So the thing he said here. Okay, so he said, um let me go back up here. All translated beings undergo another change in their bodies when they get. Okay. This change is the equivalent of resurrection. All mortals after death are also resurrected. In the resurrected state, they are immortal and eternal in nature, and those among them. Okay. Millennial man. Okay, sorry. Millennial man will live in a state akin to translation. That's an interesting. That's an interesting sentence. Akin. Let's look up the definition of akin. Akin means of similar nature or character. So not the same. Okay, now this is news to me. I think that whenever we were talking about the millennium, everyone always says that we're going to be translated. I've said it myself. It seems like Bruce R. McConkie here is making a distinction between um like being like fully translated and millennial translated, if that makes sense. So in other words, it's like the three Nephites cannot procreate, but us during the millennium, not being fully translated like them, will be able to procreate. So I guess that makes sense. So let's read that again. So he will, so this is talking about the millennial man, the physical condition of the millennial man. No, let's read it from right here. Millennial man will live in a state akin to translation. His body will be changed so that it is no longer subject to disease or death as we know it, although he will be changed in the twinkling of an eye to full immortality when he is 100 years of age. He will, however, have children, and mortal life of a millennial kind will continue. We shall speak more particularly of all this shortly. Okay, good. During the millennium, there will, of course, be two kinds of people on earth. There will be those who are mortal and those who are immortal. There will be those who have been changed or quickened or transfigured or translated. Words fail to describe their state, and those who have gone through a second change in the twinkling of an eye so as to become eternal in nature. And I think what he's referring to there is resurrected. So mortals that are changed and then resurrected. Okay, there will be those who are on probation, for whom for whom earth life is a probationary estate, and who are thus working out their own salvation, and those who have already overcome the world and have entered into a fullness of eternal joy. And that's interesting, this phrase, when you think about President Nelson's main talk of October 2022 General Conference, Overcome the World and Find Rest. Of course, he's talking about just living the commandments, but maybe there's kind of a double meaning. We're getting to that point where you've overcome the world and become resurrected into like a celestial glory. There will be those who will yet die in the sense of being changed from their quickened state to a state of immortality, and those who, having previously died, are then living in a resurrected state. There was like a question that came up about this a long time ago in the comments, like, don't you still die? And it seems like yes, but it's not really like you die. Like it seems like basically just your body changes. You go from a quickened state to a resurrected state, and now that's the new definition of death. That's my understanding. Okay, there will be those who are subject to kings and priests who there will be those who are subject to kings and priests who rule forever in the house of Israel, and those who, as kings and priests, exercise power and dominion in the everlasting kingdom of him whose we are. So that makes it sound like those that are resurrected, including, of course, Christ himself, because he will be the king, they will be the ones that are the kings and priests and so forth. There will be those who, as mortals, provide bodies for spirit children of the Father, for the spirits whose right it is to come to earth and gain houses for their eternal spirits, and those who, as immortals, Abraham is one, are already begetting spirit children of their own. I think it says something to that effect in the scriptures. Maybe that's where Bruce R. McConkie is getting it, that Abraham has already I think it says Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob have already inherited their kingdoms. But the idea that they are already having spirit children, man, they are so far beyond us right now. There will be those for whom the fullness of eternal glory is ahead, and those who, again like Abraham, have already entered into their exaltation and sit upon their thrones and are not angels but are gods forever and ever. We have heretofore summarized such things as we know about the immortal beings who shall dwell from time to time on earth during the millennium. We shall now consider such things as have been revealed with reference to those who are born and who live here during the 1,000 years of plenty and peace. Okay, so that's us. Millennial man. Oh yeah, and remember, that resurrected beings, from what we've read before, I'm not going to look it up, but from what we've read before, Christ himself and other resurrected beings aren't necessarily going to be here the entire millennium, but they'll come when it's necessary to take care of business and different matters. Okay, man, his millennial state. We shall use the word mortal to describe those who live on earth during the millennium and who are not resurrected. They'll be mortal in the sense that they have the power of procreation and will beget children. Beget children. Okay. Quote, and the earth shall be given unto them for an inheritance, saith the Lord. And they shall multiply and wax strong, and their children shall grow up without sin unto salvation. That's in D&C 45:58. They are the ones of whom the Lord said, they shall see the kingdom of God coming in power and great glory. For behold, and see, that's one of those key phrases recently is power and great glory. For behold, the Lord shall come, and his recompense shall be with him, and he shall reward every man, and the poor shall rejoice, and their generations, their posterity, the seed of their bodies, lives that come the lives that come into being because of them, their children, shall inherit the earth from generation to generation, forever and ever. D&C 56 verses 18 to 20. Men during the millennium will be mortal because they will die. Not as men die now, with the spirit leaving the body and the body returning to the dust whence it came, but will die according to the pattern and system ordained to occur during the blessed period of the earth's temporal continuance. There will no more be graves during the millennium. Men's bodies will not see corruption, and their spirits will not go to a spirit world there to await a future resurrection. See, so this makes me question again. So does that mean that it's not possible to die the way that we do now? Like, say you fall off a cliff. Um, it seems pretty clear that we're not going to die from things like heart attacks. What's it called when you have a um, aneurysms? Physical failures. I don't. Again, I don't know if you were to fall off a cliff, down into well, there's probably not going to be a Grand Canyon anymore because all the valleys are going to be lifted up. But if you were like on a tall building and you fell down, would you die? Would you get injured? I don't know. Um, we've read that we're still going to be eating. So if you stop eating, will you die? I don't know. These are questions that are only going to be really resolved and answered in the millennium. But it's exciting to think that, because you think about your kids, your grandkids, when you're out in a park, and there's like a river nearby, you really keep your eye on your children because you don't want them to fall in the river. Is that going to be the case in the millennium, or can you just be like, "Yep, kids, go have fun. We don't even need to be here." Because for one, there's no more evil, there's no more kidnapping and murder and stuff like that. And then on top of that, you can't even die. Uh, so just like go ahead. Oh, you're gonna go over to Missouri. Just make sure to be back in a couple months. you know. Um, I don't know. It just sounds really exciting. We'll just have to wait and see, I guess. Okay, continuing. Rather, children shall grow up until they become old. Old men shall die, but they shall not sleep in the dust, but they shall be changed in the twinkling of an eye. D&C 63:51. In that day an infant shall not die until he is old, and his life shall be as the age of a tree. And when he dies, he shall not sleep, that is to say, in the earth, but shall be changed in the twinkling of an eye, and shall be caught up, and his rest shall be glorious. And of course, that's talking about being resurrected. D&C 101, verses 30 to 31. Such is the revealed word as it came to Joseph Smith. The same truths as given to Isaiah announce, there shall be no more thence an infant of days, nor an old man that hath not filled his days. For the child shall die 100 years old, but the sinner being 100 years old shall be accursed. Isaiah 65:20. Isaiah's description of life and death during the millennium seems to preserve the concept that even then, even in that blessed day when Satan is bound and righteousness overflows, even then men are free to come out in open rebellion and as sinners suffer the fate reserved for the sons of perdition. Uh, Manifestly they, being accursed, would die the death with which we are familiar. For their resurrection is destined to be in that final day when those who shall come forth, who shall remain filthy still. Um, okay, so I guess that makes sense. That's another question that I have. In the millennium, those that make it into the millennium are going to be celestial and terrestrial law-abiding people. But like he says here, there's still going to be agency. You're still going to be able to rebel. And my question is, to what degree are people going to do that? Are we going to have a reemergence of telestial people? I don't know. I kind of don't think so. I'm not sure. I guess that would be possible. So what he's saying here is like the way that the resurrection works is first you have those that are celestial that get resurrected first. Later on in the millennium, you are resurrected to a terrestrial glory, but it's later on in the millennium. And then for those that are telestial, they have to wait until the end of the millennium. So, say that at the beginning of the millennium, you are terrestrial, and that's how you die. And the terrestrial resurrection hasn't happened yet. I guess in that sense, well, you wouldn't just go from translated to terrestrial. It must be that you die and then you wait in the spirit world until that time comes for the terrestrial resurrection. Now, if it's possible that you're living a telestial life in the millennium, then you're definitely not going to be. You have to wait till the very end of the millennium. So this is something I haven't really thought about, and I think that's what he's talking about here. Um, Manifestly, they being accursed would die the death with which we are familiar, for their resurrection is destined to be in that final day when those who shall come forth who remain filthy still. And what's interesting about that is since there's not going to be any corruption and disease and stuff like that, because like even now there are people that die of old age, their bodies start to kind of fail, but it doesn't seem like that would be the case in the millennium. And so if you're one of these people, would you just like suddenly as soon as you hit 100 years old, you're like walking down the street and then it's just like, oh, time's up, and then you just fall down like Woody from Toy Story? I don't know. I don't know. These are things I have not really thought about before. There are not words in our language that accurately convey to our minds either the nature of man or the type of life he is destined to live during the millennium. In that day, in process of time at least, the Lord has promised to restore a pure language, which would be great if we could finally uh, have a language that matches the way that it's written, so that you don't have all these silly words like in English that are just they're spelled in a way that they're not pronounced. I'm looking forward to that, so that all men may call upon the name of the Lord to serve Him with one consent. Zephaniah 3, verse 9. For the present, however, conditions in that blessed day are so far outside the realm of our experience that we do not have the language at our command to describe them. Sounds pretty good. Perhaps the best thing we can do is to describe the life and status of translated beings and to say that their life is closely akin to that of millennial man. Again, he's pointing out here that translated beings, that's not exactly the same as the type of translation that you're in when you're in the millennium and still in mortality. Enoch and his city were all translated and taken up into heaven without tasting death. So also were Moses and Elijah and Alma and many others of whom we have no record. Indeed, the whole the whole focus of life among the worthy saints from the day of Enoch to the day of Abraham was to live so that they could be caught up and receive an inheritance in that city whose builder and maker was God. That's interesting because he's talking about how that was the goal from the time of Enoch to Abraham. It's like, okay, I gotta join them, and it seems like that's what Melchizedek and his people did. Uh, all these, and so you have to wonder if it's not like a separate city anymore, but basically Melchizedek and his people joined the city of Enoch. All these were with Christ in his resurrection. That is, they received their resurrection. Oh wait, all these were with Christ in his resurrection. That is, they received their resurrected and immortal bodies at that time. John the Revelator and the three Nephites and others whose identity is unknown have been translated since the day of Christ. Okay, so it's saying that those other people that were translated, including the city of Enoch, have been resurrected. All these were with Christ in his resurrection. That is, they received their resurrected and immortal bodies at that time. That's another thing I didn't know. I'm learning a lot of things from this chapter. I was assuming that Enoch and his city were um, still in a translated state, but it seems that they've been resurrected according to this. John the Revelator and the three Nephites and others whose identity is unknown have been translated since the day of Christ. They are all carrying on their ministries of preaching and prophesying and will do so until the second coming. Again, if you want to hear some stories about the three Nephites, I have a playlist called The Three Nephites, so go check it out. There's many different stories about things that they've done. When they will receive their resurrected and immortal bodies. The Lord, for instance, promised John, "Thou shalt tarry until I come in my glory, and shalt prophesy before nations, kindreds, tongues, and people." This ministry is among mortals on earth, but John has great powers that mortals do not possess. Quote, sorry. Gosh. "I will make him as flaming fire and a ministering angel," the Lord promised, "and he shall minister to those who shall be heirs of salvation who dwell on the earth." D&C 7 verses 3 through 6. It is from the Book of Mormon account relative to the three Nephites that we gain our greatest scriptural knowledge about translated beings. Jesus told them, "Ye shall never taste of death, but ye shall live to behold all the doings of the Father unto the children of men, even until all things be fulfilled according to the will of the Father, when I shall come to my glory with the powers of heaven. And ye shall never endure the pains of death, but when I shall come in my glory, ye shall be changed." Sorry, "ye shall be changed in the twinkling of an eye." So I have to borrow this again. "From mortality to immortality, and then shall ye be blessed in the kingdom of my Father. Similarly, the faithful saints who are alive when the Lord comes, and who are caught up to meet him in the midst of the pillar of heaven, shall be quickened." So that would hopefully be all of us listening to this right now. Okay. "Their bodies shall be changed from mortality as we know it to a millennial type mortality, to the type of mortality possessed by translated beings." Okay, so their bodies shall be changed from mortality as we know it to a millennial type mortality, to the type of mortality possessed by translated beings. Those who are born during the millennium will enjoy this same quickened state, and all of them, each in his order, will be changed in the twinkling of an eye to his resurrected and immortal state when he becomes 100 years of age. Again, sorry, "and again, ye shall not have pain." Gosh dang it. "And again, ye shall not have pain, while ye shall dwell in the flesh. The Lord Jesus promised them. Neither sorrow, save it be for the sins of the world. 3 Nephi 28, verses 7 through 9. Similarly, pain and sorrow, tears and weeping, and the anguish and sadness of our day, all these shall cease in the millennial day. That sounds great. Our Revelation says simply, and there shall be no sorrow because there is no death. D&C 101:29. Isaiah promised he will swallow up death in victory, and the Lord will wipe away tears from off all faces. Isaiah 25, verse 8. And to Isaiah the Lord said, Behold, be ye glad and rejoice forever in that which I create. For behold, I create Jerusalem a rejoicing, and her people a joy. And I will rejoice in Jerusalem, and joy in my people, and the voice of weeping shall be no more heard in her, for the voice of crying. Isaiah 65:18 through 19. And from the pen of the Revelator we learn, and God shall wipe away all tears from their eyes, and there shall be no more death, neither sorrow, nor crying, neither shall there be any more pain, for the former things are passed away. Revelation 21, verse 4. After summarizing many things that happened to the three Nephites in the course of their ministry among the descendants of Lehi, Mormon said, they are as the angels of God, and if they shall pray unto the Father in the name of Jesus, they can show themselves unto whatsoever man it seemeth them good. Then, in discussing whether they were mortal or immortal, Mormon gave this exposition. I have inquired of the Lord, and he hath made it manifest unto me that there must needs be a change wrought upon their bodies, or else it needs be that they must taste of death. It is one thing to die, and another thing to taste of death. All men shall die, but those who receive an instantaneous change from mortality to immortality do not taste of death. All right, so he's making a distinction between dying and a taste of death. And so Mormon continues, therefore, that they might not taste of death, there was a change wrought upon their bodies, that they might not suffer pain nor sorrow, save it were for the sins of the world. Now this change was not equal to that which shall take place at the last day, but there was a change wrought upon them, insomuch that Satan could have no power over them, that he could not tempt them. And surely this will be the case with men during the millennium. And they were sanctified in the flesh, they were holy, in that the powers of earth could not hold them. And in this state they were to remain until the judgment day of Christ. And at that day they were to receive a greater change, and to be received into the kingdom of the Father, to go no more out, but to dwell with God eternally in the heavens. 3 Nephi 28, verses 30 to 40. The growing glory of the millennium. Our blessed Lord will come at the appointed time. The great conference at Adamadayaman will assemble to worship the King on schedule. There will be an exact moment when his foot touches the Mount of Olives. He will stand on Mount Zion with the 144,000 high priests at a given point in time. Armageddon will spread its fire and horror and death when and as decreed in the divine timetable. The tares will be burned and the vineyard cleansed of corruption when the Lord Jesus returns, and there will be a day and an hour and a split second that marks the beginning of the millennium. The seventh of the 1,000-year periods can only commence at one single instant in time. As we have seen, many of the events incident to the second coming will take place during the close of the sixth seal, and others after the opening of the seventh seal. And yet the formal beginning of the millennium will take place at a fixed and determined and set moment. It cannot be hastened by righteousness, nor delayed by wickedness. The old earth will die, and the new earth and the new heaven will be born at as exact an instant as is the case with the birth or death of any form of life. And by the way, you guys, this is a common misconception that we have to be ready to receive the Lord. No, that's not the case. Both Bruce R. McConkie and Joseph Fielding Smith have said, if we're not ready, that's just too bad for us. It's too bad. There's an appointed time it's going to happen. He's not waiting for us to get ready. Of course, he's working with the people and he's working to get everybody ready, but we shouldn't think that, no, it's not going to happen yet. We're not righteous enough. No, that's not the case. Whoever is a terror at that point will be a terror, and they'll be bundled up and burned, and those that are ready will move forward. I think I'm going to end here. I'm not so sure it's really talking anymore about being translated, and that's kind of that's like the point of this particular video. You can go to archive.com. That's where I'm at right now. It's an online library. You just create a free account. It's free, and there's a lot of church books that are here, including basically everything from Bruce R. McConkie, Joseph Fielding Smith, and others. And so you might want to check it out. Archive.com is awesome. They're also the ones that do the Wayback Machine, where you can search the internet as it was in years past, all the way back to like the 90s, and see what websites were like back then, or you can search for specific things. So yeah, that's going to be it for this one. So the big things that I take away from this that I didn't know before is, okay, well, this got reinforced in my mind, that in the Millennium, we're not going to have blood running in our veins. 2, that it's not going to be the same type of translation that the 3 Nephites in John the Revelator have experienced. For them, essentially, it's like they're like a more advanced translated state where they no longer procreate because now it's past their time. Like they're essentially they're done with their mortal lives, but they've been given a special mission. But for us in the Millennium, we will be translated. We'll have all the same things, but we will be able to procreate. It seems that there will be death, kind of like the same that we did as the way that we know it now for those that are terrestrial, and maybe if there's celestial people, I don't know, because they can't be resurrected right away until that time comes, the resurrection for the terrestrial and the telestials. Gosh, I feel like there were like other things, but I have to like kind of think about this for a while. But there was a lot of really interesting things here. It seems to me, based on what we read, that the translation for those that are alive right now, that are members of the church, that are righteous, that translation will take place when we go to meet Christ in the cloud when he comes. So it seems like basically hopefully I'm part of that when I say we, that will be the first ones to have that change take place on our bodies. Yeah, so that's going to be it for this one. Hope you enjoyed it. If you have any thoughts or opinions or any additional information, put it in the comments below. If you have additional information, make sure to leave the source for that information. But that's going to be it for this one. If you haven't already, please make sure to subscribe, like this video if you liked it, leave your thoughts and opinions down in the comments below. Also make sure to share it, and I'll talk to you guys later.